Okay, I'm pretty excited for essay number 62. We've just finished essay number 61 here in our beautiful book, American Miscellany. It was published in 1865, and we've just finished reading about agricultural science, which actually seemed to be a lot more about minerals than plants, but anyways, lovely little essay there. We've just finished that, and this publisher likes to add these little tiny blurbs to kind of fill space in his book. He doesn't like to leave a surface uninked. That's his thing. So we'll just go ahead and read this tiny little kind of a in between. What is this? A blurb, an anecdote, an aphorism. Let's just go ahead and knock this one out. We're here on page 141 of American Miscellany, and let's read a little bit about goodness. Goodness does not more certainly make men happy than happiness makes them good. We must distinguish between felicity and prosperity, for prosperity leads often to ambition, and ambition to disappointment. The course is then over, the wheel turns round but once, while the reaction of goodness and happiness is perpetual. That's nice. All right, so let's check out our next essay here. We're on essay number 62. The subject is researches on food. So I'm interested to see what they thought about food in 1865 here on page 141 of American Miscellany. All right, researches on food. Nothing but accurate scientific investigation can ever teach the proper treatment of the human system either in health or in disease. No length of experience of vague sensations following up the taking of certain kinds of food, exercise, or drugs is enough to determine the precise virtues of these appliances. There is only one sure way of finding out the exact uses and functions of what we eat, or what acts upon our bodies, and that is to determine precisely, on the one hand, the substances used by nature in the vital processes, and on the other, the composition of the materials that we supply to the system. If we determine first the wants of the body and next the resources of the world, and select the latter exactly to meet the former, we will learn on truly rational grounds the way of keeping up the vigor of our physical framework. Baron Liebig, I think that's right, Baron Liebig, that's it. Baron Liebig is at present conducting a series of researches on the nutrition of animals, on exactly the same principle that he and others have proceeded with respect to the nourishment of plants. A plant is analyzed and found to contain certain constant elements, some of these derived from air and water, others of an earthly kind, derived from the solid soil. The requirements of the plant being thus laid open, it can be seen by similar investigation if a soil contains in proper form these precise elements. If it contains some of them and not others, then what is wanting is communicated, and no more. This is true insight and rational practice. All other schemes founded on what is called farming experience can be at best mere probabilities. Liebig has just presented to the world his researches on the chemistry of food, which is a most valuable contribution to the accurate knowledge of the action of food on the system. It is wholly devoted to the constitution of the flesh or muscles of the body, which form one of the largest and most important constituents of the system. The fleshy masses, which make the soft parts between the skin and the deep-lying bones of the skeleton, are the prime forces of the moving organs, the source of strength, energy, and every form of bodily activity. The first consequence of derangement in the constitution of the flesh is a loss of working vigor. and this is apt to be followed up with the disorders for the other parts of the system, the stomach, lungs, brain, etc. It is of prime importance, therefore, that we should know in a rigorous scientific way, which means in the one perfect way, of course, what is necessary for preserving or restoring the elements which enter into healthy flesh. Liebig, accordingly, has set to work by chemical analysis to find what are the substances that are combined together in animal muscle. Some of the substances that he has found are entirely new, and he confesses that there yet remain one or two constituents which he has not sufficiently investigated, so as to be able to say what they are. Flesh is made up of solid fibers, cells, membranes, all of an organized structure with fat. It also contains a very large quantity of liquid matter called the juice of the flesh. This juice is a solution of a great many elements or substances in water, the weight of the water itself being many times that of all the dissolved substances put together. Liebig's investigations have been directed to the analysis of these substances. He takes a mass of 10 pounds of newly killed flesh, lovely, reduces it to a fine mince, mixes it with water, and squeezes the whole mass through a linen bag until he has extracted as much of the liquid contents as possible and left only the solid portions behind. When the fluid thus obtained is heated up to a certain temperature, the albumin, which is one constituent, coagulates and can be separated. At a still higher temperature, the coloring matter, which makes the redness of raw flesh, also coagulates and is removed. The separation of these simplifies the compound. The remaining fluid is always of an acid character, showing that it contains, with all of its other ingredients, one or more acid substances in a free or unneutralized state. A part of the inquiry is to find what these acids are. Accordingly, an alkali, baryta, B-A-R-Y-T-A, baryta, is poured in to combine with and precipitate them. The precipitate is withdrawn and examined and found to consist of phosphates, which phosphates have the double base of baryta and magnesia, which last, therefore, must have been present in the juice. It is thus shown that phosphoric acid is an essential constituent of the juice of muscle. The liquid that is freed from filtration from these precipitated phosphates is slowly evaporated, until at last crystals in the form of colorless needles appear at the bottom. These crystals, when examined by chemical tests, are found to be an entirely new substance with distinct and specific properties, which Liebig fully investigated, and it has received the name creatine from the Greek word for flesh. This creatine, therefore, is an invariable constituent of the muscular fluid. Its amount in any animal is greatest when there is least fat. As fat accumulates, it diminishes. The physical properties of a substance are its specific gravity, texture, color, and appearance. The chemical properties are its composition, or the proportion of its elementary constituents, and its chemical action upon other bodies, such as acids, alkalis, and tests of all sorts. These properties Liebig has detailed in reference to the new substance, and by them a key will be found to its uses in the living body. The action of a strong acid on creatine creates a second substance hitherto unknown to chemists, which is alkaline in its nature, called by Liebig creatinine. This substance, however, may not only be produced from creatine, but is found in the system of another permanent constituent, and as such its properties deserve and have received a distinct investigation. The original creatine, resolved by an acid into creatinine, is next resolved by baryta into two other elements, one of them urea, already well known, but the other is a completely new substance of the alkaline character, named sarcosine, and apparently worthy of being studied. here, therefore, from one crystalline, I think that's a typo, probably crystalline deposits, there arises 3 organic compounds that have all something to do with human vitality. We are not yet done with the original liquid. After the crystals of creatine are deposited, there is a liquor still remaining. By adding alcohol to it, it is made to give a new deposit in white foliated crystals. These are separated by filtration and examined and yield a 4th new substance of an acid character called by Liebig inosinic acid. This is a very remarkable element. The flavor of the meat seems to reside in it. When it is acted upon by a high heat, it gives off the very smell of roasting meat. Recurring again to the unexhausted mother liquid and adding more alcohol, a new separation takes place. A thick syrupy substance falls to the bottom, and a lighter liquid floats above. The separate examination of these brings out additional elements. Here is found the creatinine, natural to the muscle. There is also now found lactate of potash, and it turns out that lactic acid, or the acid of sour milk, is a constant element of muscular juice, as well as the phosphoric acid that came out at an earlier stage. The lactates of flesh receive from Liebig a separate investigation. After settling the characters of these great organic constituents, creatine, creatinine, sarcosine, inosinic acid, and the compounds of lactic acid, he now turns to what are called the inorganic elements, such as phosphoric acid, potash, and other alkalis, and founds a curious speculation upon the presence and mutual actions of the lactic and phosphoric acids. The great idea of the speculation is that lactic acid is the substance that directly supports respiration, or whose consumption gives the animal heat, and that the sugar and starch taken in our food are changed into lactic acid in order to become respiratory elements. In fact, the use of sugar is to supply the lactic acid constituent, which has to serve this and other purposes in the body. Another very refined speculation is offered by the author, founded on the fact that the alkali contained in the flesh is potash, and the alkali contained in the blood is soda. He shows how the chemical properties of phosphoric acid and soda, which go together in the blood, would explain the process whereby nature makes the exchange of carbonic acid for pure oxygen in the final act of the respiratory process. These elements do not exhaust the constituents of muscle, and it will take much additional study to follow out all their functions in the human body. Moreover, muscle, although a very important tissue, is only one out of many, and it will be necessary to go through a similar examination of nerve and other tissues before the chemical actions involved in the animal system are fully known. But in the meantime, Liebig draws some very important practical inferences from the discoveries already made. In the first place, he shows how the boiling of meat acts upon the various constituents of the juice. We require, for the support of our muscle, not merely the fibrous matter of animal flesh, but all the array of the albumin, lactates, phosphates, creatine, etc., already mentioned. If any of these are allowed to escape, we are deprived of some needful element and our system suffers. Now cold water can dissolve the great mass of these important ingredients, so that if the meat is put into cold water and slowly boiled up, the water will have carried off all the albumin and several other substances, and the remaining beef will be a kind of husk, insufficient to nourish the system, unless the water it has been boiled in is taken at the same time in the form of soup. To boil beef without losing the nutritious and savory elements, Liebig gives the following directions. The water is, in the first place, to be put into a brisk boiling state. Into this boiling water, the meat should be plunged and allowed to lie for a few minutes. It is then taken out, and cold water is to be poured into the boiler till the heat is reduced far below boiling, or to about 160 degrees. The meat is then put in again and kept in the water at this temperature for 2 or 3 hours. Everything is in this way affected and can render the flesh pleasant and wholesome as food. The contact with the boiling water at the outset coagulates the albumin of the flesh all round the surface of the meat, and closes up its pores with a solid wall that none of the internal juices can pass through, and the meat is preserved in all its integrity while undergoing the action of the heat. On the other hand, when we wish to have a rich soup, we must take means for thoroughly extracting the various elements of the fleshy juice, for these elements are the essential portion of a soup. A perfect soup would be a mixture of all the soluble constituents of the muscle. In fact, Liebig's original mother liquor, which he wrought upon to bring out all the various substances already enumerated. Accordingly, the plan of making soup is as follows. When 1 pound of lean beef, free from fat and separated from the bones, in the finely chopped state in which it is used for beef sausages or mincemeat, is uniformly mixed with its own weight of cold water, slowly heated to boiling, and the liquid, after boiling briskly for a minute or 2, is strained through a cloth from the coagulated albumin and the fibrine, now become hard and horny, we obtain an equal weight of the most aromatic soup, of such strength as can be attained even by boiling for hours from a piece of flesh. When mixed with salt and the other usual additions by which soup is usually seasoned, and tinged somewhat darker by means of roasted onions or burnt sugar, it forms the very best soup that can be prepared from 1 pound of flesh. An extract of meat thus prepared is found to be an invaluable provision for an army in active service. Administered along with a little wine to wounded soldiers, it immediately restores their strength, exhausted by loss of blood, and enables them to sustain the fatigue of removal to the nearest hospital. Of course, what is so useful in this extreme case must be useful in thousands of minor occasions of bodily prostration. The loss of strength means the loss of the substances that support vitality, such as these very ingredients of fleshy juice. The fleshy fiber itself is wasted more slowly than the substances that float in the liquid that invests it, so that, in fact, a supply of these matters has a more instantaneous action than any other refreshment. We can thus explain the effect of soups upon convalescent patients. No doubt the perfect soup of Liebig's description would be found to have a far greater strengthening power than the generality of those in common use. There is one other principle of very great consequence stated. It is that the gastric juice of the stomach, which dissolves the solid food into a liquid pulp, has nearly the same ingredients as the juice of flesh, so that the power of digestion will be very much affected by the supply of the constituents of the juice to the system. Hence, a good flesh extract soup, besides giving materials to the muscle, provides the solvent liquid of the stomach and facilitates digestion. To people suffering from indigestion in the sense of deficiency in the gastric juice, the supply of this material is the natural remedy. Another useful hint is also suggested by this connection of stomach and muscle. The digestion of food and the exertion of the muscles consume the same ingredients, so that both operations cannot well be sustained together beyond a certain limit. Moreover, it naturally follows that rest during one operation will cause increase of energy in the other. During the height of the digestive action, muscular exertion cannot well be afforded unless there is a great overplus of the common ailment. It is well known that when digestion is weak, rest after meals is necessary. and that excessive exercise unfits the stomach for its work. The explanation now afforded may supply practical wisdom on this head to all men. Liebig also pointed out the effect that the salting of meat has on the precious constituents of its juice. The salt withdraws a great portion of these dissolved matters, which are thrown away with the brine. The injuriousness of a long course of salt provisions is thus distinctly accounted for. In these investigations, Liebig has made use of flesh derived from a great range of animals and has determined the comparative richness of each in the various substances in question. He has tried the flesh of ox, roe deer, horse, hare, fox, fowls, fishes, etc. In this way, he is likely to furnish what has been sought for in vain by other methods: a comparison of the nutritive qualities of the different kinds of food. No man that understands the real difficulty of settling such a point can put the slightest faith in any of the tables of the comparative digestibility or nutritiveness of substances that have hitherto been put forth in books of medicine or dietetics.